Welcome to the 3% Podcast, the bi-weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by Tom Roberts from Riff Raff.
Hello, hello.
And what's that? Good opening, strong opening on our part. And we are back after like less than 2 weeks this time.
Well, yeah, 2 weeks.
Since we were late last time. And I guess the only thing that we really have to talk about primarily is this article that you sent about the Booker Prize, which took place in between last podcast, in which we were upset about the Nobel Prize. Then the following Monday, the Booker Prize was announced, and that was also a bit of a controversy. It was like book Twitter's like glory moment was like all of the past 2 weeks being able to be pissed off about prize awards, which is fun. But the main thing was that the Booker Prize was instead of being given to one book, was given to two, to Testaments by Atwood, and I keep forgetting the name of the other one. I always screw this up. Do you remember what the name of it is?
Oh God.
I want to say Girl, Woman, Other, but I don't think that that's right.
That's very close. Which is just giving credence to the fact that this woman is being overlooked by Margaret Atwood.
Yep. 100%. So you want to frame that part of it?
So all right. Well, the first problem is that it's unfair to, when you split the prize, you basically say neither of these is significantly better than the other, which is problematic in and of itself because the prize exists in order to recognize the quote unquote best book according to their jury of the year. Secondly, when you give one of the prizes to Margaret Atwood and one to a relatively unknown author, it's obviously the unknown author is going to get overshadowed by Margaret Atwood. Which is, it is what it is. If the jury just really found themselves unable to split the hairs and to pick a winner, and they were deadlocked and whatever, I'm open to that sort of every once in a while sort of decision being made. But when one of them is Atwood, it begs the question, well, is this a political statement? And they didn't feel comfortable that it was also the best novel, but they wanted to include it somehow and recognize it. And does it represent, like the career Oscar sort of thing for someone who never quite won Best Actor?
Yeah, although she has won the Booker Prize.
She has won well, yes, but it's also, I mean, and in the wake of the prize, it's because the jury was sort of being judged by the public and the media, it did come out that they sort of, if not explicitly, sort of gave it to her for her career, which definitely goes against the rules that they themselves have set up, because they said, all right, so the quote we have from, who is this?
First of all, real quick, Bernardine Evaristo is the name of the other author that won. I don't think we've spoken it, and Girl, Woman, Other is correct.
Okay. So Peter Florence said, we have two books that we can't give up. What did that make the, okay. We have two books that we can't give up, right? So it's our decision, said, blah, blah, blah. Next, he told the 5 jurors tried to vote on a word. Quote, didn't work. It was our decision to flout the rules and divide this year's prize to celebrate 2 winners. So that happens, and of course, everyone is like, well, what's going on? So then, where is this? Afua Hirsch wrote in The Guardian that she was proud. I think she was a judge.
She was.
How do you judge, and she is quoted as saying, how do you judge the titanic career, the contribution to culture of Margaret Atwood against the sheer beauty of Elise Shafak's Istanbul?
So, and part of this is, and that wasn't even just a quote, that's her op-ed explaining this.
Right. And then, how do you pit the phenomenon of Salman Rushdie against the quality and consistency of Bernardine Evaristo, who has, in my view, hitherto hugely underrated? So these are like, they're not intended to be, insulting one author or the other, but it does sort of call the entire judging process into question. All of this sort of laid out, I should say, several days after the prize by Sam Jordison, who is the British publisher of Lucy Ellmann's Ducks Newbury Report, which was on the short list for the Booker, and which obviously didn't win. He is the publisher of a very small press called Gallybeggar, based out of Norwich in the UK. And he was upset, justifiably so, because he now feels that they never even had a chance to win the Booker, if this was the process, if Atwood was being regarded in this way, and if Rushdie was, also perhaps being regarded in this way, also on the short list for his Quixote book, Quichotte, then, what is the point of Gallybeggar even paying for the honor of being on the short list to the tune of 5,000, almost 6,000 pounds for being on the short list? And it's fair. It's a fair criticism of the Booker Foundation. It's just, it's unfortunate that this is the way this sort of thing is shaken out. It's unfair to not just Ducks Newbury Report, but the other books that didn't win, when it seems like Atwood was just sort of definitely going to be given the prize, and that everything else was sort of hand-wringing over how to make that seem acceptable.
Yeah. Yep.
So you told me privately that you have talked this to death and talked to your class and talked to other people about this. So what is it that you have to say about this?
I have everything well, there's two things. One, that everything that he said and that you just said, I agree with. That it does seem like it's hugely unfair. And there's an earlier quote, the first quote before he wrote this op-ed piece. The first one that he was quoted as saying was basically like, he said so much as like, I am shaking. It's clear that this wasn't a fair competition, that this was never going to be about a single book. It wasn't what we were told it was going to be. We, invested all this money and took this big chance, and it's not a level playing field, which is like, yep, welcome to the world, which the world sucks. And this is one of my favorite parts of like the past few weeks, is that now everyone's pissed about things. And like, I feel like everyone's just like me now. We all realize that this is all crock of shit. And like, it's hard to take any of these things too seriously. So I agree with him, and I think that's all very valid and true. And I feel like that's the part that I've talked about over and over again, about all the things of why this is it is disruptive. It's bad. There's the first Guardian article about the winners said Booker Prize Committee chooses 2 winners, like world event, or world class book or something, world book and obscure author. And so they've always downplayed Bernardine Evaristo. That's horrible. I think the whole thing is bad. It would have been an easy choice, just like with the Nobel, to choose her, and fuck Atwood doesn't need it, and her book can be totally fine, and it's got all the attention it needs. It just doesn't need this when you have that option of being like, we give it to the first Black female to ever win. Or you could have given it to Ducks Newbury Report, which would have been great. But like, the way that that was handled is all poorly handled, and then all their statements about it are super, super tone deaf. The other thing is that if this were the United States-based prize and Dan Wells wanted to say these things publicly, there's not a chance in hell the New York Times or any of our publications would support this sort of like dissent. And I respect the Guardian and the UK generally for allowing this dissent to take place. You would just be shunned if you complained about things and pointed out that it isn't a meritocracy and that things are stupid. Like, you just get shunned nowadays here. And I don't think that any of the book, quote unquote, book journalism would take this complaint seriously if it was coming from someone who's not in this British culture where they are much more allowed to do this, allowed to say things and be honest about it. So yeah, so I think that's my other part about it, is that I respect their culture so much more than ours. I think ours is dumb. Like, if someone complained about this for the National Book Awards, no one would pay attention to them. And it's probably the same. It could be the exact same situation.
Can I ask why you think that is? Because I have a theory, but
I think because
I don't know that it's an obvious one. I don't think it's a conscious reason that it would be sort of ignored, that Dan's hypothetical sort of hand-wringing and complaining would be ignored. I think there's probably a lot of like deep-seated issues surrounding that. What do you think it is, though?
Yeah, well, I think that it's partially that we have our country's too big, so there's not enough people that, if you're outside of New York, you're outside of everything. Whereas in the UK, there's not that many people. There's not that many outlets. They all know one another. They're all tied together. Like when I was at that European Literary Network, the advantages that you have for being in the UK and are astronomical. Like the treatment that a place like Fitzcarraldo gets as a startup press and has been given by various outlets is so far beyond what any American outlet's going to do, because America's just so self-satisfied with our like corporate behemoths and our idea of like more money, that everything would always filter upwards, and someone like Dan would just be considered to be a complainer who's not aware of like their place within this this unstated yet very clear hierarchical situation.
Do you think it might also have to do with, at least in the U.S., and I feel like this is more of an issue in American publishing than in the U.K., where book culture seems to be a little more strongly entrenched within the culture at large, which is not to say that, like, you know, they don't have their worries about Amazon and all of those sorts of things too, but that in general, it's a little more, they feel like they're probably on firmer footing than we do here in the U.S. And I think book culture in general in the U.S. sort of feels like it could all fall apart at any moment. And it's not entirely untrue. And that's partly what you're saying, like outside of publishing, it's not, none of this would be necessarily be news to the larger public. Whereas because of publishing's sort of, and literature's sort of place in British culture, they do treat it as actual, you know, general public news, and this is something worth discussing. Whereas in the U.S., this would just be some like niche sort of news article compared to everything else. And, you know, if this happened at the Oscars, of course, everyone would be up in arms. But for the National Book Award, no one would care. And I think because of that, any, you know, self-criticism just sort of gets brushed aside and said, shh, you know, don't worry about that. We have to make this all look good.
Yeah.
Right. You have to pretend that everything is just going fucking great.
Yep.
Basically.
Yep.
And in Europe and, you know, the UK, these sort of things are treated as important aspects of culture and not some sort of niche world, and discussed openly and all of those sorts of things. And I agree. It's weird that we would not. I agree with you. Dan's complaints would fall on deaf ears. You know, like the Canadian press would probably give him room to talk, but would anyone?
Yeah.
Here in the U.S., I doubt it.
I doubt it, and we wouldn't see the Canadian things probably either. It's right. Yeah. It's just I think they treat culture in a much more respectful and like publicly engaged way, and we're left being what we are. And it's disappointing. Yeah. It's really discouraging, I think.
Yeah, book culture is I mean, I've talked about this a lot, and this is like such a broad sort of statement and assessment, but like the way the way book culture has transformed into something akin to like comic books, right? I feel like the public facing sort of image of literature is now Bookstagram. And there's not a lot of, we've talked about this many, many times, there's not a lot of like serious engagement with literature.
No. Not
until it's turned into a movie, you know? Yeah. And it's very frustrating for that. This is another discussion for another time and place, but I don't know how to change it at this point, and I don't know if it's possible to change it, to go back to a time when, you know, the Norman Mailers of the world were on TV once a week, but yeah. Here we are.
Yeah, isn't Alex Shepard the one who always said there's no book journalism? It's just like press releases and you know, it's not really journalism, or it's just like sort of repeating the press releases and doing some sort of like bit of a story, but there's no like investigation to it. There's no criticism to it. It's just like promoting brands at times. Yeah,
and I mean, the nonfiction world, I think, is thriving. I mean, people who write these big, serious books certainly have platforms on the news and, you know, the Daily Show and places like that. But it seems like literature, big, serious fiction, is not treated the same way that it once was.
No, not at all. Yeah, I don't know if it ever if anything will ever change or go back, or if we're just sort of stuck now.
Right. I mean, there are moments. Colson Whitehead was on the cover of Time magazine, for fuck's sake. Like, that's a big fucking deal. I appreciate that. I'm glad that still happens every once in a while, but I just wish it happened more often. That's all.
Yeah. It's always fun to find out that that Time magazine exists.
Right.
Still.
Oh, Time magazine.
I was looking at I literally on that stupid Apple News app that tells me the news every day. It was like, do you want to follow Newsweek? And I was like, Newsweek? Newsweek in so long. Who knew?
Newsweek still exists, huh?
Yeah. It'd be like if you said Life magazine exists. Like, that's not possible. That's silly. But yeah. So the Booker's a mess. All the book culture's a mess. Everything's. I think I threw it away. I went through the other day when I was going to class. It was right after the Booker Prize. I read the 4 headlines of like the PW Daily email to see if there's anything I wanted to talk to my class. And the 4 items were like Booker Prize controversy. Then there was self-published books are up 40% to 1.6 million self-published books last year. Bookstore sales are down 12%, and Macmillan's ebooks will not be in King County Library in Washington because of their restrictions on how many copies the library can buy. The library's opted not to buy any because it violated their arrangement, their internal promise to customers, or not customers, but patrons, to not have to wait so long for particular books. So it's like everything just seems like a disaster. Like I literally printed this out and was like, okay, here's 4 pieces of information that are like the news for today about publishing, and every one of them is like a disaster.
I have a lot of questions about this Macmillan thing, but we're going to move past it. Can we go back to the prize thing for just a second?
Yeah.
So I don't know what the cost is, but I do know that if your author, and by your I mean publisher, is chosen to be, he's on the short list for the National Book Award, any of the categories, you have to sign all of these agreements that say, you will pay for the author to come to the ceremony, and then you have to buy this table at the bank, right?
And I think the table's like $10,000.
I was going to say 10,000. That was the number I remember hearing. Yeah. That was also several years ago when I worked at Penguin and Viking. They had some authors, and I remember it being discussed. That's a significant investment.
I talked to Lisa about that related to the translation prize, because you were supposed to. New Directions violated this last year, but you agreed to also bring the author and the translator to that event, and it's like that plus all these things adds up to like a significant amount, and most likely you're shortlisted. 80% of the titles will not win. Right. And that the shortlist sales from the shortlist will not cover those expenses. So by being on the shortlist, you're actually going to lose money on that book. And she said that they have support for independent presses to help assuage those costs, and they always have. I don't know what that. I don't think she gave me any details on like what that discount is, but in theory, it would be less than that. I don't know how much less, I guess, or if that's really like, or if she's just saying that to be like, shut up, Chad. We don't take criticisms. Everything's fine.
What? I mean, look, I don't mean to suggest that anyone on the juries of any of the National Book Award categories is choosing publishers based on their ability to pay for this damn banquet and award ceremony. But the reality is, in practice, that the large publishers are basically propping up the prize.
Yeah. Because
they're paying, I mean, do the math. 10,000 times, I don't know, 40 books? How many categories are there?
Yeah, I was going to say there's 5 categories.
5 times 50, that's $200, that's $250,000.
Yeah. Right? And you have to pay for all the stickers too. There's more than just the table. There's a lot that goes into it, like for the marketing.
The table is the thing that is of no actual value, right? Like stickers, sure, you pay for stickers. Like they go on the book and blah, blah, blah. But like, paying for the table? Like, come on. I mean, I don't know how much it costs to put on an award show at Cipriani every year, but a lot, probably a lot. And I don't know what the prize money is or where that comes from as well. But it's weird that, to me, it's weird that all of this is supported by the people who might actually win the prizes. That doesn't seem like that's how it should be.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to pay to do these things. And there's a problem with the booker as well, right? It seems like if you are deemed worthy to be on the short list, you shouldn't have to pay to then go and celebrate said event.
Yeah. So
it's really bizarre to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So they have changed some of their conditions so that that it's only if your press is an income under 1 million, you do not have to pay for the promotional campaign if your book becomes a finalist. You do have to have them at the award ceremony. The expectation is that they will buy a seat for their finalists. Discounted tickets are available for small nonprofit and or university presses. Cover all travel and accommodation costs. The foundation will provide travel support for finalists in the translated literature category. And then they have to agree to participate in website-related publicity. So they have changed it to reflect those things. These were not there last year when this first was announced. These pieces of information were not included on the National Book Award thing. So it's good that they do include them. So it does seem like they're there. But I just get the sense that, like, outside of the translation one in poetry, there's just not. It's just going to be big press stuff. I mean, that's fine. That's what it's there for, I suppose, to give these people a way of feeling really good about themselves, in addition to making $1 billion. There was a thing yesterday in PW that Houghton Mifflin Harcourt's revenue expectations have increased, and so they're firing 8% of their employees.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Way to go, capitalism.
Right.
Cool.
Anyway,
yeah. So do you want to know about this King County Library thing?
I mean, I am curious about it only in that I love pulling back the curtain on these sorts of decisions. So yes, go ahead.
Okay, so the deal started when Macmillan putting in an embargo on their ebooks for their new titles. I think it just started, like this project just started. So beginning November 1st, I guess it begins in 2 weeks, sorry. Beginning November 1st, Macmillan's new digital content terms for libraries will allow libraries to purchase a single perpetual access ebook copy of each new Macmillan title for the first 8 weeks after a book's release. After 8 weeks, libraries can then license additional copies for $60 per copy for a term of 2 years or 52 lens, whichever comes first. So that changed the nature of, like, how in the past for a book that was like the Colson Whitehead book, the library would be able to purchase 10 ebooks that their patrons could check out. And I don't know the rest of the terms were at that point in time, but the number of uses or the time, and then you had to renew it, blah, blah, blah. But they could purchase 10. Now they're only allowed to purchase 1 at the beginning for the first 8 weeks of the book's release. So King County said, this is problematic. They asked them not to do this, but they are the top digital circulating public library in the country, logging more than 4.8 million checkouts of ebooks and digital audio in 2018. And as an internal thing, they pledged that readers would not have to wait for any book for more than 3 months. However, not being able to buy multiple copies of the ebook would force that situation to be in play, or that the people that were waiting in a queue, if there were like 100 people that wanted to check out Colson Whitehead's book and they could only have 1 copy, and that 1 copy was loaned out to 1 person for a month and then a second person for a month, their system would then trigger purchases of like 98 other copies of the book the second that it goes unembargoed. So, or that maybe not 98, but it would purchase ones to accommodate that queue, which would be really like detrimental because they wouldn't need them at that point in the same way. So they opted just to not carry any of them and not buy them at that point in time. That after the embargo is expired, after that 2-month window or 8-week window, they might go back and purchase ebooks of the popular books that their patrons are requesting, but they will not have them there on day one the way that they have up until this point.
This is entirely being done to drive sales of the book.
Yeah. Well, they want there to be more, I mean, which is ridiculous. It's crazy because the cost of like the ebook for a library of $60 is wild. And it does, if
it can be loaned out, how many times did you say?
52. But like you can buy the hardcover for $30 and loan it out. I believe their average is like 75 or something like that. It's slightly higher. Like they made the ebooks lower than what the actual wear and tear is, if I remember this study right. But the public libraries exist to serve a public purpose, and they should be supported. Not this is weird. I mean, Macmillan's doing this because they want to increase their sales on all these other things, but really they're just what they're going to end up doing is restricting access, because the stores aren't going to be, the libraries don't have the space or the time to buy 30 copies of Colson Whitehead's book, and then after like the year, I mean, his is a bad example, but whatever new book that's like hot for the moment and won't be hot in another 2 years, they're going to buy way too many hardcovers of, and then have to try and get rid of those. They don't have the space for that. They won't have the budget for that. They will then force like the smaller presses that do depend on library sales out of that space too, because their budgets will be tied up with this Macmillan shit, and their space will be tied up with this Macmillan shit. It's just overall like damaging towards patrons and people who have to access things in that way. Like limiting people's access to books is never positive.
Yeah, I can't believe that Macmillan thought that this was going to be something that would happen and no one would comment or complain about or anything like that. Seems crazy.
Yeah, and people did complain. They had like there's was it a statement? The American Library Association held a press conference saying that they, on September 11th, talking about this and saying not to do it. And they started like a public advocacy campaign. The ALA's executive director, Mary Gikas, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. They had an online petition. They did all sorts of stuff. The library's Transform Book Pick will offer library users unlimited access to a select ebook for 2 weeks with no holds and no waiting. They started like that program. They started these things to try and combat this idea, and Macmillan still apparently just went ahead with it anyways.
Yeah, I mean,
and King County being the biggest, one of the article, just sorry not to interrupt, but the frame for this too isn't that it's one county library, but it's the biggest county library that's saying this, and they suspect that other county libraries will therefore follow suit because they've got the precedent now, and that if it doesn't work for them, it's not going to work any better at a smaller library.
No. This is clearly just a thing to drive sales, point blank. And they incorrectly assume that somebody is going to want a book so badly that when the queue at the library is so long, they're going to go out and buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a really dumb assumption to operate on.
Yep.
I would think. I mean, people who use libraries use them for a reason.
I mean, you can look into like I'm sure there's very handy demographics on who uses libraries the most and what the borrowing things are, but especially from what I've seen, and maybe this might be wrong. So I don't know if I agree with what I'm about to say, or I don't know if what I'm about to say is anywhere near true, but I believe that most of the ebook loans from libraries are to the elderly or infirm, like the people that can't go to the library, can't get these things. They will frequently check out the audiobook or the ebook, because you can adjust the font size is one important part for like as you're aging, and also that if you can't get to somewhere, rather than ordering something through Amazon, or your just budget is limited, because you are, whatever, you're older, you're not working, whatever the situation might be. If your budget's limited, you're not as mobile as you used to be, and you need ebooks or audiobooks because of the sheer fact of being able to read them, we restricted those people who are probably the biggest users of this program. And that feels like a weird thing too. Like, it doesn't feel like it's like if you're trying to say, okay, you 35-year-old young professional, quit just stealing our ebooks or reading our ebooks, go buy something for once and support the industry. Like, I can see where like someone in a meeting would be like, I wish we could do that. This doesn't seem to address, I don't think that this is going to have that impact. Like you're saying, I don't think people are going to be like, oh, this line's too long, I'm going to go buy it from my local store. I mean, they might buy the ebook from Amazon, so this will be $10 if they're already trying to go to an Amazon or an ebook version. And that's not going to help you guys. Like, I don't know where this seems very weird.
I mean, they're not trying to help bookstores.
No, they're trying to help themselves, but they would, but it's not going to, the way that it could most maximize the help for them isn't going to happen.
No.
It's like it seems like an inefficient way of trying to help yourself too.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you and I. I don't know how to. But this is not an easy transition here. But the way that authors mean, you've asked me about this. Authors who promote, buying their book, pre-sales, blah, 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 through Amazon in order to gain those numbers and whatever, and then their relationship to independent bookstores and all that sort of thing. I don't know. To me, it's an all or nothing thing. You either, are opposed to Amazon and everything awful that they do to everything, or you're not. And, you got to live with that decision. And I don't quite, it's clearly a money grab sort of thing. Like I was just looking at we got an event proposal today from this, activist sort of woman, an organizer for a long time. And her book is published by, I think, Chelsea Green, and her book page, it says, buy the book. And the very first thing it says, I am aware that Amazon is problematic. That said, I'm still distributing through Amazon. It's like, fuck. No, like you can't have it both ways. Her logic is that it makes it available to more people. It's like, you can't do that. You need to do one or the other. And I think, to tie this back, like Macmillan, if their goal in publishing these books is to make them available to more people in whatever way that these people come across them, restricting the library access is certainly not the way to do that.
Yeah.
I think there's a short-sightedness to this where like people think, oh, we're losing ebook sales because libraries do ebook lending, right? And they want to adjust that in the short term. Well, it's like, no, maybe in the long term, the more people who can read this in the first 8 weeks of its coming out, the better word of mouth exists in the long term for the health of that book and of that writer's career, right? The more people who read this as easily as possible, as quickly as possible, the better it is for the book, for the publisher, for the author, all of these things. So to just restrict it in any way from the outset just seems batshit crazy.
Yep. It's very weird.
Yeah.
I wonder what will happen with other publishers, if they'll follow suit with Macmillan, or other libraries will follow suit with King County, or if this will just be a blip that everything gets resolved and Macmillan's like, yeah, you're right, we probably shouldn't do that. I'd be curious to see like what happens.
Don't fuck with libraries, I think, is pretty good, motto when dealing with them as a publisher. Like, you got to go along with what the libraries want.
Yeah. Because the libraries wouldn't really, if they didn't exist already, they would not come into existence. And they serve such a huge population that is super overlooked.
Right.
Like if there's no, so not the Amazon versus any bookstore thing, but if there's no new bookstore in town, everyone who is like wants to get access to anything has to go through our library system. If you're not gonna, you either buy it from Amazon, you can drive out to the Barnes and Noble, or you go to the library. And this is a 1 million person area. So like to restrict anything for that huge of a population seems really dumb.
Yeah.
And that's just one small little space. Yeah, I did find a thing where it said that some books will last 100 plus checkouts with only minimal repair needing to be done. But it seems like the average can be anywhere from 30 to 100.
That's interesting.
It really depends on the type of book, if it's bound, how it's bound. Yeah, there's too many variables, I suppose. The thing that surprised me more was this increase in self-publishing.
I'm not surprised by that.
The numbers are so staggering, though.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I get so many pitches for events from self-published people. It's just staggering. And this is the result of, everyone in culture saying, you should write a book. And these people go and write a book. And that's what happens.
And then they're just there. They're just existing somewhere.
So many of them.
I feel like someone told me once that like the average sales for a self-published book, if you take all of them in the aggregate, is like 10. Since there's 1.6 million that came out last year, that there's like, 1 million of those that sold like 2 copies.
That's insane.
Isn't that crazy? So like, I don't know that anyone has like all the data on that, because most of it would be going through Amazon and you won't have access to that. But it would be really interesting to see like what are you really, how many copies are you going to sell of this book that you put your time and effort into, and then felt like this is the best way to do it.
There's also a lot of these things are sold at whatever, farmers markets and
Oh God.
websites and, events that don't even go through a cash register and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's impossible to track, but
absolutely, it would be impossible to track, but I'd be curious. I'd love that there's more data available. That would be fun. Just in general. More book data. I don't have anything else to talk about. There's nothing going on.
No, don't really feel like there's a whole lot going on.
Frankfurt happened, and Marcus Dole from Penguin Random House talked about how awesome the book world is. That was a thing.
But that's every publishing event I go to is essentially that.
Hey guys, it's all fine. It's great. Everything's
awesome.
Great.
Stores are thriving. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. Okay. I knew that. I was like, I remember reading this yesterday, and it being like, wow, this is insane. Okay. Quote. Many of you know that I've always been quite upbeat and optimistic. I would say realistic about the global publishing industry and especially about our future prospects. This is the best time for publishing since Gutenberg.
Yes.
And then a speech. So like, it's certainly like, obviously Penguin Random House is doing real well. So like, I'm sure things are great for them. But then he says, who thought that in 2019, 80% of our global distribution is in physical formats, and that has stabilized the entire book ecosystem. On top of that, our audience is growing every year. Literacy rates are growing, so we have more people on the planet who can read. Children's books are going through the roof, Dole said. These are, quote, the facts, he stressed, the, quote, truth about the industry. Quote, so let's change the image of this industry. This industry deserves so much better. I am very optimistic and for good reasons. What kind of fucking pep talk is this? Is Marcus Dole like coaching Little League now and like trying to incorporate that into his like rah speeches at Frankfurt?
That's crazy.
And also like anyone who starts saying like children's books are going through the roof, these are the facts, this is the truth, is just so Trumpian that it's hard to take that seriously.
It is very hard to take that seriously. Like
it just feels like bullshit.
But yeah, that's not data. That's just him asserting that is data.
Yep. Frankfurt was great because I didn't get emails for a long time. I wish Frankfurt happened more frequently.
Were you there?
No. I'm gonna go next year possibly. I'm going to London for sure in the spring, but no, I didn't go, but it was great because nobody emailed me except for like two or three agents would be like, oh, that book we sent you, there's interest from an American publisher here, can you get me a response or whatever? But outside of that, like all the normal emails I get, like nothing last week. It was wonderful. It's like such a peaceful respite. Now tomorrow it's gonna go crazy again.
Right, you're gonna get all the pitches that they couldn't sell during the frenzy.
Yeah, it's always I did a pretty good job of explaining things yesterday to various agents. I felt pretty good about myself taking it seriously and giving them full responses, which is just waste of time in the end. But whatever. But I'm going to Guadalajara next month, which will be fun.
Cool. And I'm going to Rochester in a couple weeks.
Like a week.
No,
I don't know that I'm ready for this.
I got to go to Switzerland first, and then I'm going to Rochester. So.
Really? So you're doing the Switzerland thing again?
Yep.
This is the
Jan Michalski Foundation.
Right, and they have an award too, right? But you do work on the
I do work on the residency.
Yes.
Jury. Yeah. So I'm reading through 84 as of today. Proposals and things like that, which is a weird process. I have to say, sometimes it's a translator from like German to Spanish.
Oh yeah.
And we're just like, and so they submit the proposal in French. They also speak French or English, right? And then the proposal comes in and it's their translation into Spanish. And I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, none of us, like the jury is made up of a bunch of Swiss people and me. You know what I mean? And I don't know how many of them read other languages besides French and English. So it's definitely a weird thing.
Yeah.
Like, weird.
Speaking of fellowships, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, but it's not that I think like these people should be excluded. I just don't know how I'm supposed to actually assess it.
Yeah.
It's an existential question for sure.
How many do you give out?
I checked. Last year it was 40.
So almost half of the ones that you have.
Yeah, last year the short list. So basically the way like thousands of people apply, and someone at the foundation narrows it down. And last year we narrowed it down from 120 to 40, and this year I'm guessing it'll be 40 again. But we're only at like 80 something, so
that makes it a little easier.
It makes it a little easier, like, to know as I go through them. Oh, hey, one out of every two I can give a tentative yes to, and then we decide during the meeting itself. So,
right.
Anyway.
So related to that, I know that there are people who are listening to this podcast who would be eligible for this, but the Humanities Center at the University of Rochester has external fellowships that are given out to 2 scholars who hold tenure-track positions at other institutions. Faculty at the rank of assistant, associate, or professor may apply. So let me frame that first. But this is always, these fellowships last for a year. You get up to $60,000, along with $5,000 for research and travel. You're here from September 8th, 2020 to May 15th, 2021. And the fellows have to participate in like bi-weekly seminars and other workshops, but they play an active role, whatever. But they get to work basically on what they want to do. Adam Morris had one of these a few years ago to work on his book, American Messiah. But they frame these every year under a particular rubric, and this year's rubric is translation and transformation. So projects might address the meanings and uses arising from the communication of a written text in a language or format other than the one in which it originated, the theory and politics of translation and its cultural and social dimensions, including issues of gender, race, ethnicity, and religion, art, film, dance, and music in relation to literary works and historical events, the popularization of science and humanistic thought, the role of the translator, the publication and marketing of translated texts, the transformative nature of digital media, adaptation or persistence of beliefs and practices as a consequence of cultural encounters, and other similar matters. So anyone, and I talked to the director of this, and they're open to having translators apply for it, as maybe even that the work that they would end up working on would be a translation, as long as they're able to communicate and participate in these bi-weekly seminars with other professors who will be talking about professory type of things, academic sort of things. So people that are listening to this that qualify this, you should definitely apply. I mean, it's a pretty nice setup, and like I know a few people who are thinking of applying who are pretty big names and would be very interesting to have around for a year. But it'd be cool to have 2 really good fellows get this particular external fellowship for next school year. The deadline is December 10th. So it's like you have to do it fairly quickly, but all you really need is a cover letter, a proposal of no more than 1,000 words, writing sample, letters of recommendation, and a CV. So it's not the most intensive application process that you can imagine. But that's my little plug.
I should add, in light of that the Yamahalski, the fellowships to stay. So what they give you is basically space, and they pay for you to get there. But other than that, you're on your own for food and whatever. And it's anywhere from like 2 weeks to 6 months at this place in the Jura Mountains in Switzerland, and it's absolutely gorgeous and remote and all those sorts of things. It is open to translators as well.
Yeah.
In fact, a good, like, I don't know, one quarter of all the applications are always translators, and more every year. So they should apply.
There you go.
There are opportunities out there.
There's a bunch of these. There's at Alta, there is always the awards, residencies, workshops thing, or workshops might be wrong, but like the different grants and applications that you can get to get these sort of fellowships to usually go through. I really wish that one year someone would put together a packet and just have that of like, here's the things that you can apply to, that like even a working Google Doc that people could add to. Maybe that exists. I think I've said this like 12 times and I don't think it exists, but maybe it does. But that would be super handy, so you don't have to like rediscover new things every year.
Seems like this is something Alta should do.
That's why I hesitate to say that it doesn't exist, because maybe they did do it, and I'm just not aware of it. But I will make a controversial statement about Alta. related to what we were talking about with the Booker Prize and the National Book Awards, was that the policy of charging editors to attend the conference, I think, is wrong. I think that they should allow editors to attend for free, because an editor that's attending that if that's publicized will likely draw in one more person to attend the conference than would have. And I think it's a zero gain in that way, or like it would zero loss. So you wouldn't lose anything by letting in an editor for free, given the value that they're adding to the conference and possibly attracting more people. So I would like to stump for that again. And I'll say it publicly here so that everyone knows my opinion, because I've had enough people complain to me about this.
Well, I complained because I had to pay to go as a.
I had to pay to go. They sent me an email saying, "Look, you haven't registered yet. You and Kaya need to register because you're on panels, and if you don't register by Monday, it will no longer be $150. It'll be $300." And I was like, "Wow, this is a really shitty way of handling this statement." But we'll pay it, so I did. But it just raised a lot of questions. Like PR, people are bad at PR, I guess, generally. So I'm bad at PR too. But I think with that situation, I would have been like maybe handled it a little differently.
All right, I want to end on something positive here, because God knows we're never positive. The other day, I had a customer, Saturday afternoon, had a drink at the bar, and then he tells me he knows somebody who you'll be able to figure this out from the story. Tells me he knows somebody that you and I both know, and he suggested that he come to the store, and he asked me for advice on a book, and gave him some manchette, and he bought a couple of those, and then he at the top underneath the two manchettes was the invented part, and I said, "Oh, I know who recommended this," and he said that the customer said, and I'm quoting here, "Yeah, he never fucking shuts up about it, so I thought I'd give it a try."
There we go. I'll take it.
There you go.
Dream Part is out next month. We're sending copies to you guys today.
Cool. So yeah, just banging the drum forever on a book does eventually pay off. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. That is good. That is an uplifting thing. I've mentioned this before, but On Becoming a God in Central Florida is fucking brilliant TV show. It just ended the first season on Showtime. It was well worth it. Go register for Showtime for their 14-day free trial and just binge the 10 episodes and then cancel. If you don't have a Showtime account, but like that show is wonderful. I love that show.
Don't know what you're talking about.
It is Kirsten Dunst is one of the main stars, and it's mostly centers around her, but around her and an Amway-like distribution pyramid scheme that exists in this world in 1992-93 in Central Florida, and it's got all of the great bits about these multi-level marketing companies and how they're like so corrupt and distorted, and like people who get on top of the pyramid and how they're super corrupt. And it's very funny. It's a show that doesn't stick to one thing, where there's moments where it's very funny, and then it's also incredibly dark, both about like capitalism and the way that the ideas behind capitalism and behind American capitalism and individualism in particular prey upon a certain class of people and prey upon a certain way of thinking. And takes advantage and basically can ruin their lives. So it's a wonderful show. It's really good. It's got a lot of cult-like elements to it, because that's what those things like Amway basically are. And it's also like it's just fantastic. The last couple episodes that involve like a telethon that's basically benefiting Amway, which Amway used to sponsor the Easter Seals telethon. So it's not even, this is pretty like historically accurate, is really intense and like it's very uncomfortable in a lot of ways, because I remember seeing these various telethons and various things like that, and the people behind them and how they worked was always a little bit sketchy, but this show really makes it sinister in a way that I think is wonderful.
Cool. I will at some point get to this show. Don't know when.
Yeah, I had to finish that so I can cancel Showtime and sign up for HBO to watch this Watchmen show.
I just watched The Righteous Gemstones, so, very different. All right, I gotta go.
Okay. Talk to you in a couple weeks. Again, we'll be back. Yep. I guess that'll be right before Alta.
Yes.
So we'll have another one up just before Alta. And until then, I've got nothing else to add.
Have a good one.
You too.